AAUW is me.
I wanted to meet some new people and do some different things. And I also wanted to be part of an organization that had a social commitment to young women and the community at large.
I want to be a contributing member of an organization where women help women in promoting education, in making friends, in entertaining one another, and in sharing ideas about this world.
Women would want to join the AAUW because we have a very fierce commitment to equality and equity for women and girls. And if that's something that you're interested in, this is one of the best venues to help channel that energy.
Hello, welcome to AAUW Connections. Tonight we're going to be discussing an issue that's a very serious issue, certainly one that's been around for as long as there were men and women, I guess. But we'll be talking about it especially as it relates to our communities. We're going to be discussing a program called W.O.M.E.N, but it's W.O.M.E.N, you know, get the rest, SV. And here to tell us about this program are Ruth Patrick, who is the director of the program, and Sina Correa, who's the assistant domestic violence counselor. Now, first of all, before we go any further, why don't one of you tell me what that acronym stands for?
Well, sure, I'll tell you. W.O.M.E.N-SV stands for Women of Means Escape Network, Silicon Valley.
Okay, so that tells you something, Women of...
Yes. Yeah, so you might think that, well, women of means, why do they need resources? But that's the issue, that often when women are involved with an affluent abuser, it makes it very difficult for them to get out of a domestic violence relationship. There are unique challenges attached to that, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yes. Now, when was the agency, do you refer to it as an agency?
Program.
Program? When was your program founded?
We're 1 year old, and we were launched last year in February through the Los Altos Community Foundation. They gave us our first grant a year ago. Okay,
so they gave you operating funds.
Yes.
As well as just their umbrella organization.
Exactly, yes.
And during that time, how many people have you served? Do you have a sense of that yet?
Yes, we've helped 50 women and 3 men in this past year.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's like we've uncovered this invisible epidemic that's slowly becoming more visible.
And the area you serve is Los Altos Hills, Mountain View?
Palo Alto and surrounding areas.
So anyone
Saratoga.
who hears of your service and calls.
Yes, yes. Los Altos is like the hub, but we sort of radiate out there. We've gotten calls from Los Gatos, Saratoga, other counties even. Well,
and I can assume that this is a very good program, well regarded, because I understand that you've already won an award.
Oh, yes, thank you for mentioning that. Actually, the Santa Clara County Psychological Association each year gives an award to a program for outstanding community service. And for 2013, W.O.M.E.N-SV has won that award.
That's really remarkable. Now, I'm going to ask each of you, how did you come to work in this field? What is your background? Sina, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I was going through the social work program at San Jose State, and I ended up in a domestic violence agency for my internship. Yeah, and it ended up getting hired on, and then I met Ruth, and I liked what she was doing, and her energy, her never-ending energy. I call her my energy bunny because she's always on fire. So, yeah, that's pretty much how I got here.
And you were with the program pretty much from the beginning?
Yeah, I can't take credit for doing all the hard work. I just kind of assist when I can.
Well,
yes.
I'm sure that's significant.
It is,
and
hugely
Ruth,
significant.
have you always worked in this field? How did you come to decide that this was a program you wanted to
Yes, I've had a few incarnations. In my previous life, I was an English teacher, but I worked at Stanford Center for Research and Disease Prevention, creating a curriculum that was designed to prevent eating disorders in young women. Then I went out into the San Jose School District and taught it. And while I was out there, I noticed that there were some children that were having a hard time paying attention, and it wasn't necessarily because they had ADD or ADHD, but sometimes they can be labeled as that because it's a behavioral diagnosis. But really what was going on was trouble that they were experiencing at home, trauma and chaos. And sometimes teachers can be reluctant to ask difficult questions because they're mandated reporters, and I felt really. So
they purposely don't ask because they're afraid of the answer?
Well, it's not a hugely intentional thing, but it can be a very difficult topic to address. It sets in play a whole chain of events that are can be very traumatic for the entire family. But I felt that there needed to be something to address this issue, and I had a couple of friends that were going through a very difficult divorce in the northern part of Santa Clara County and not finding any resources really to address their needs. And beyond that, there's almost a public perception that if you have resources, what do you need to seek the help of a program for? You've got money. I mean, you should be able to take care of it. But that's leaving out a really important consideration that financial abuse is a huge factor in more affluent areas too.
Well, that brings me to the next question, which is what is unique about these domestic violence or situations in communities of some affluence?
Yeah, well, the two most difficult socioeconomic brackets to escape from are the lowest economic level, which may seem, pretty clear, but what may also seem kind of counterintuitive is the highest economic bracket. That is the other most difficult bracket to escape from, and it's because of the financial abuse that attaches to so many families where there's domestic violence, where women may drive a fancy car, their kids may go to the fanciest local schools, and on the surface they may look like they're doing very well. But if you scratch beneath the surface, you may find she's got $100 to buy groceries for the week, or her funds are very limited. They may be all in the partner's name, and he may be hiding assets. One of the other features about living in an affluent community is you're often married to a very high-powered partner who's got an impeccable public image. And it's very difficult for people to sort of deal with those two very different sets of circumstances. The fact that you are a high-powered engineer, doctor, lawyer, but you may also be an abuser, and that can add another set of challenges for women when they're going through the court system and when they're trying to seek help.
So, Sina, is that why these women are less likely to seek? Are they less likely to seek help?
Yes, and these men have this image to the outside world that they're very charming, they're very, that's true for abusers in all economic spheres, but out of fear of not being believed, it's very hard to reach out. And these very high-powered men can afford the best attorneys. They may cut funds off from their spouses. There may be prenuptials that they have signed, so they have no access to anything other than what they have on them.
Is there ever the fear in the women or something, or reluctance, let's say, to come forward because they've had the benefit of all these material things and they don't want to lose it?
Definitely. There's a lot at stake, a lot to lose. There's their lifestyle, there's their friends, their neighborhood, the clubs they belong to, the schools that their children are going to. There's a lot at risk, and it can make them very reluctant.
Or even fear of losing their children.
Yeah.
Because they have, their abusers are oftentimes very connected. They know all the right people. They may know people in law enforcement or in the judicial system, and then it could be hard to fight it.
Yes, and many times women will not call the police for that very reason, because they're so well connected, but also because they're very protective often of their husband's public image, and they don't want to damage that. And what happens sometimes is that the abuser will use that to his advantage, and in court say, the police were never called, I have a pristine record, she's crazy. There's, it's just, she's making up stories.
Is this, in a sense, we often hear stories, or not hear stories, but hear accounts of actual facts where children who have grown up and been horribly abused by one or the other parent or both still love those parents very much, even though they have suffered all this abuse. Is this the same kind of thing? Do these women, in some cases, still feel that they love them? Or either way, a man or the woman, does the abused person still feel love for the abuser?
Yeah, in many cases, yes. There is something called traumatic bonding that happens when women become almost captives of an abuser. And they often develop very similar symptoms to this to prisoners of war, and there's a reason for that, because they're living under the same kinds of circumstances. They're waiting for the next emotional bomb to go off. They're living in this constant state of fear and anxiety, and they often end up with anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of that. But
now, do you find, are women in one socioeconomic group more likely to be victims of abuse than in another, or is that pretty much across the board?
That's pretty much across the board.
Yeah, it crosses all economic levels.
Yeah. Just because you're in a higher income bracket, you're not protected or less likely to have this happen to you.
No, but sometimes it expresses itself in different forms. There's more common forms in higher income brackets. From our experience anyway, it's very common to see emotional and financial abuse. And
well, emotional is always present in any abusive relationship.
And let's go back to, I'm going to take a step back. How would you describe domestic violence? Is it just, so obviously it's not just physically.
Right, and that's the issue with a lot of women. Sometimes they think, well, I'm not being beaten, it must not be abuse, but there are many different forms of domestic violence.
There's a lot of faces,
Yeah, there is the physical, but there's emotional, and when I say emotional, I mean, it can start off very subtly. Somebody saying things like, well, gosh, you were talking to that guy for a long time at the party, you must have been really enjoying yourself, or, honey, do you really want to wear that dress tonight? Is that really, you think that's really your color? Like, just certain little things, but they are incremental, they grow over time. And then there's verbal abuse, name calling or put downs, and financial abuse, controlling the checkbook, not giving her access to the joint account.
Isolation.
You
no longer have a network after a couple of years. Your sister talks too much, or your mother is so negative always, let's not go see her anymore. And little by little, he manages to cut off all your connections and all your support networks. Yeah,
when Sina says little by little, it's almost like, you know, the old analogy, putting a frog in a pot of boiling water, you turn it up degree by degree, and over time it's boiling. And that's how many women get pulled into this kind of relationship. They fall in love with this man who treats them very well in the beginning, and that's the image that they fall in love with, not realizing often that there's this other dark side. And they think, oh, if only I could sort of unlock that key to the behavior that he showed when I first fell in love with him. Yes, not realizing that they are one and the same. That Jekyll and Hyde personality, it's the same person.
So is that, I noticed in some of your literature you talk about an abusive personality. So what are some of the hallmarks of an abusive personality? What red flags should a person who's in a dating situations or at the beginning of a relationship be looking out for?
Yeah, control is a huge one. Power and control dynamic underlies all forms of domestic violence. And if a woman is going out with a man and he orders for her, decides what they're going to have in a restaurant, or is always making the decisions about what movie they're going to see or what they're going to do, or if he's very critical of her friends, seems to be very jealous or suspicious, or checking in with her a lot. A lot of women think in the beginning, oh, he cares about me, he's texting me 15 times a day. But over time, that can start to look more and more like stalking.
Jealousy.
I was
going to say jealousy. The constant checking in, that was what I was going to bring up too, that at first you think it's cute, maybe, or, you know, and he wants to know what's on my phone, and some will check, you know, the other person's phone, or so absolutely, those are early warning signs. Also, quick involvement, very quick involvement. Let's get married. You know, after 3 months.
Yeah, she'll say, he swept me off my feet.
So all of a sudden, you're in a situation where you can't get out. You were like, how did I end up here? I just got in so quick, and it was all, he could have been absolutely wonderful for those first 3 or 4 months, an absolute Prince Charming, but then all that charm was spent. All of a sudden, she's not perfect anymore. She's not behaving well. She can't cook like his mother, or whatever it may be that sets them off.
Yeah, and often the first incident happens on like on their honeymoon, or when she gets pregnant, or after the baby is born. And in a regular family, the addition of a child is a sort of welcome event, and love grows to fill it.
But can be stressful.
Yes,
but it's welcome.
Yes, but with an abusive personality, that new child is seen often as competition for the attention of the abuser.
Now, you have a list of signs of trouble, danger signs, and I don't know how many were there, maybe 15 or 20, something like that. Now, if somebody were to look at that list, do you look at that from a quantitative or a qualitative point of view? Do you say, well, here's my partner who has 8 of the 20 characteristics, this must be trouble? Or do you look at it and say, it might be just one, but that one is so horrific that it doesn't matter that the other 19 are all perfect? How does that work?
Yes, you're exactly right. It's a qualitative, not a quantitative thing. It's not like a cosmopolitan survey where you score 18 out of 20, this is who you are. It could be just one. It could be jealousy, or it could be constantly monitoring your activities, and that's a huge red flag. Stalking behavior is a very dangerous red flag for.
But you could have one or two and not be an abusive personality. You know, we all have our quirks.
Yes.
But, you know, just because you maybe yell at somebody in traffic doesn't mean that you're an abuser in your own home.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and there are some, like there are some times when somebody will be abusive, and it's just an isolated incident. It's a situational form of abuse, and it's not like they are an abusive personality. It's like, oh, they lost their job or something traumatic happened to them, and they might lose it for a moment. So I don't want to paint all abusers with the same brush. And there are abusers who are capable of empathy and compassion and remorse, and they want to change. They say, teach me how to do and be different. Abuse is a learned behavior, and it can be unlearned with motivation.
It can be unlearned?
It can be unlearned. You can learn to act differently, to respond differently, but you have to be motivated to do that. And with the particular clients that we're working with, we're looking more at abusers that are more invested in keeping the status quo. They are often all about power and control, and they are usually hugely successful.
And they have a sense of entitlement.
Yes.
And that's why they behave the way they do.
Yeah, that's key.
Now, in these, you're saying that sometimes a person wants to learn to change. Does marriage counseling ever help in a situation like this?
Oh,
no.
No.
For several reasons. One of them being that you need to be honest in order for any kind of counseling to work. An abuser is not going to be honest about what he does at home. A victim will not be honest because there will be consequences if she openly speaks about what takes place behind closed doors.
Presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's invested in the status quo. I mean, right now, everybody walks on eggshells around him. They try to get dinner on the table on time. He comes in, and there's not that motivation to change. Often people come to marriage counseling with the woman being unhappy with the relationship and wanting to change and wanting to work on something. But it implies that a marriage counseling has this assumption that both parties want to work together to reach a compromise that is good for the relationship as a whole. And that's not the assumption that the abuser comes in with. It's about what's good for him as a whole.
And it's all working from his standpoint.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what type of services does your program offer?
I'm so glad you asked. I have a directory here, and it comes in 3 parts. And the first part is, it's like a strategy guide, questions to keep in mind when you're looking for counseling, when you're looking for legal advice. You can become a family law attorney without any training or any classes in domestic violence. So it's important for a woman to know when she's looking for a lawyer that a lawyer who may have gotten a good settlement for her friend or may not be able to do the same sort of thing for her because she's got a different set of challenges in front of her. So these are things to take into consideration. Then,
so you would give referrals to attorneys?
Yes, and speaking of referrals, this is the second part of the directory, and I have a list of lawyers who are very knowledgeable about domestic violence. I have counselors who are skilled in the field of domestic violence. up until recently, you could get your PhD in psychology and not have any training in domestic violence. And you can become an MFT with only 15 hours of
family.
Sorry, yes, marriage and family therapist with only a 15-hour online class in domestic violence. So a lot of so it's really important for women to be dealing with a therapist or a lawyer who's skilled in this field. So lots of resources there. And then the last part of the directory is educational and online references and books and materials for women to get better educated about domestic violence.
So you're a referral service. Do you do any counseling as well or not?
We do a support group. Sina helps me run it once a week.
We're not counselors,
Well, yeah,
but we do run a support group. Well, we offer a kind of a pseudo-educational. We talk about different topics every week, aside from the support where women talk about what's going on right now. Is there anything we can assist you with whatever crisis they got going on? But in the topics, we talk about children, the effects of violence on children. We talk about
effects on women.
Effects on women, statistics, red flags, boundaries, all kinds of things that may help. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Speaking of red flags and danger signs, what are some of the danger signs that are really triggers that, we read about batterers who end up killing their victim. So what are some danger signs?
We talked about some red flags before, but the ones that really should make you sit up and take notice is, well, has he been laid off recently? Has he started to drink more heavily? Does he have guns?
Does he brandish the weapons? Are there death threats? Sometimes they'll say that for years. I'm gonna whatever.
Oh.
And the more specific the threat is, the more detailed, the more he's thought about it.
So then, if that comes out in your consulting,
strangulation is another big one.
Oh yes. Yeah, very important.
So now what kind of safety planning do you do with the woman?
Yeah, so if it seems like she's in imminent danger, and if it's outside the hours of the regular courthouse, then she might want to consider an emergency protective restraining order. If he has threatened her and she's in fear for her life that evening, then we would take her down to the police station and try to get an EPRO, where we would help her organize her thoughts, because often a woman who's dealing with a very stressful situation like that and living with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, has a hard time arranging her thoughts in a coherent fashion so that she can get her story across in a way that helps the police and the judge take into account all the information and realize that it's coming from a competent, articulate source. And sometimes women will leave out really important details, but it's because of the stress that they're under. So we would look at EPROs, temporary restraining orders the following day, if that would...
Well, mostly immediate safety. Is there somewhere you can go where he doesn't know where to find you? Mutual friends are usually not a good idea because
he knows.
And they have split loyalty. Maybe they want to try to patch them up, and that's not going to work out.
Now, speaking of restraining orders of various types, how effective are they, and are there situations in where they might do more harm than good?
Yeah, I would say that a restraining order is worth the respect that the abuser has for the law. If he does have respect for the law, it can be very helpful in keeping the abuser away from her. And it's helpful for the women on several levels, and one of them is to actually save her from herself sometimes, because women that are involved with abusers can be pulled back into that relationship by having him call her a dozen times a day and say, honey, we'll go to counseling, we'll work it out, we've worked too hard on this marriage for you to throw it all away now, I'll change, to make all kinds of promises. And she can get, the average number of times a woman leaves a domestic violence relationship is 7 before she leaves permanently. So that can be an issue for her.
So when a temporary restraining order doesn't only mean that the abuser can't come any closer than so many. There's there should not be any contact.
No contact, even through a third party. And
you can't send messages through mutual friends or family member.
Yes, and so when you're talking about a restraining order, it's important for a woman to make her own decision about how safe it will keep her, or how much more inflamed it will make her abuser. But something to keep in mind too, that women can sometimes minimize the risk to their own safety because that's how they're used to living their lives. They've had to minimize in order to survive. When you're constantly being attacked, you have to sort of dull down those danger signals in order to function in the world.
Now, but with the leaving, oftentimes the restraining order comes into place when the woman has chosen to leave the relationship. That is by far the most dangerous time because you have aggravated your abuser, and things can escalate. For some they see red. Yeah,
that's
Now,
one of you alluded earlier to health risks that in your group sessions you talk. What are some of the health? Does it actually affect a woman's health?
Oh yes, everything from migraines, ulcers, digestive disorders, to rheumatoid arthritis, which is actually associated with a particular type of abuser called a pit bull. Where this is sorry to malign pit bulls, but this is a type of abuser who's very explosive, very angry, and has a hard time letting go of their victim even after they leave. But some women, they develop cancer, heart disease,
high blood pressure, a lot of stress-related diseases.
Yes, because when you think about it, if you're constantly dealing with assault coming from the outside, the stress coming from outside, it depletes your immune system. It's very difficult to deal with that on the inside.
Well, you're sleep deprived.
Yes, that too.
Right. And
that's another form of abuse too, the sleep deprivation, waking the woman up in the middle of the night to rant at her for hours at a time.
Well, even knowing that's happened, when you're in that situation, it would be difficult to sleep, even if somebody was, but then to wake you up in the middle. Now, what about children? I've seen where some people think, well, if they're young, if the children are very young, they sleep through most of these things and they don't even know what's going on.
Then they're underestimating the children's intelligence. But it goes all the way back to the prenatal stage, where when mom is pregnant and through every episode, she releases adrenaline in her body, and that adrenaline goes to the baby. Oftentimes, babies are born being more colicky, having more health issues,
so we
crying
know,
more.
So it can. Now, suppose a woman decides, okay, I've had enough. How would a woman get in touch with you? Or a man, person.
So by calling or accessing the website or emailing, you might have the information.
Yes, I believe the website is probably being displayed.
Yes, and I also do a column for the Los Altos Town Crier.
Oh, you do?
It appears monthly, and so calling would be a good way to reach out.
And do you charge for your services?
Absolutely not. It's a nonprofit. It's funded by the Los Altos Community Foundation, and so they take care of the operational expenses. And also because financial abuse is a huge factor, we don't want finances to limit.
And so, but you will take donations. And
happily.
Again, going to the website will give you a box you can check off, or will tell you how you can do it. Now, this has been wonderful.
Can I add one thing?
If it can be 10 seconds.
If you can be very careful when you go online so that history is not being, you can delete your history on your computer.
So do
Use
it on
a safe computer at the library or at a friend's house.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for coming. There's so much more here on this very serious subject, but I think you've shed a lot of light on it. And thank you all for watching AAUW Connections.